A healthy young woman goes into the hospital for a simple procedure done thousands of times a year, rarely with any complications.
But the recent death of this woman, who had fibroid tumors removed from her uterus, has members of her family now blaming a religious group for not allowing doctors to do all they could to save her. Teammate investigator Alan Cohn joins us now with the story. Alan?
And Keith, according to the statistics we've been able to find, major complications during this type of procedure happen less than 1% of the time, rare is still death. Which is why the family of this Southbury woman is asking, why did she have to die? And why were members of the Jehovah's Witnesses making life and death decisions on her behalf?
She was 44 years old and the mother of 2 young children. On January 20th, Francois Saint-Fenandre entered Danbury Hospital for a minor surgical procedure and died. Not because doctors couldn't save her, but because they weren't allowed to.
They were allowing her to breathe. They were making it to bleed to death. They were allowing her to die.
It's a death that has a grieving Connecticut family angry at the Jehovah's Witnesses, and doctors as well as nurses questioning the very foundation of their profession and hospital policy.
They're trained to, under most circumstances, do everything they can to save patients' lives. They were bound to honor her wishes.
Francois Saint-Fenandre was born and raised a Catholic, but Monique Shea says her sister became a Jehovah's Witness 5 years ago.
She was a very spiritual person, and she was looking for answers.
And one of the religion's fundamental beliefs is...
One very important teaching from the scriptures is that we follow what the book of Acts says, abstain from blood.
The Jehovah's Witnesses' position of refusing blood transfusions is well known, and in most cases the medical profession accommodates it. But in the case of Francois Saint-Fenandre, her family charges she was pressured into signing documents ordering doctors not to give her a blood transfusion despite misgivings. And they charge the Jehovah's Witnesses failed to notify them for 2 hours when something went terribly wrong during surgery.
She came to me about 3 times, and I want to make sure you have the blood transfusion. Her best friend, who's a nurse, Francoise, make sure you have the blood transfusion. And every time they would come back around and reassure her that they knew the truth.
In the end, Saint-Fenandre told doctors she didn't want blood, even if it were to become necessary. She told her family, including her husband, not to go with her to the hospital. And she signed a durable power of attorney like this one, giving a Jehovah's Witness the right to make medical decisions for her in case something went wrong during surgery.
They said that they hit a vein and that her blood pressure dropped.
The family claims doctors told them there was a desperate 2-hour effort to save Saint-Fenandre's life.
They opened her up and they had everybody possible to fix this, but they couldn't do it without the blood.
Hospital employees who don't want to be identified say those who were there were distraught. Nurses were crying.
I believe they were begging for, we need blood, we need blood. Well, this woman, her guardian, wasn't going to make the decision, or said she's not supposed to have the blood. She called her elders, then they came down, that's like another 20 minutes, and they said absolutely not, that's not their beliefs.
Saint-Fenandre was eventually given blood when her husband and her family arrived and signed documents assuming legal responsibility for doctors to act. But it was too late. Sources say the damage was done. In the waiting room, Saint-Fenandre's family confronted the Jehovah's Witnesses.
I asked them to leave. I didn't want to share the same air as these murderers.
And certainly when a family member is at risk and death seems imminent or it does take place, it's going to bring out very deep emotions.
J.R. Brown is the Jehovah's Witnesses national spokesman.
We want everything to be done that possibly can be done to preserve this life. But where we draw the line is when it comes to respect for God's law. That's what we base our belief on.
But it is also true, as this website shows, some Jehovah's Witnesses are openly questioning this long-standing policy, calling it, quote, cruel. As far as Danbury Hospital is concerned, in a statement to News Channel 8, the hospital says, quote, it has a long-standing policy regarding the treatment of any patient who is a Jehovah's Witness, which respects the patient's expressed beliefs. We believe strongly, the hospital says, in the principles of informed consent and are working continually to ensure our consent policies support patient care in accordance with each patient's identified religious beliefs and advance directives. However, some employees say privately the hospital should never have agreed to operate on San Fernandre under these conditions.
The fact is, not all doctors or hospitals have handled similar situations in quite the same way. Some have given their patients blood transfusions despite express wishes not to. And in some cases, doctors who have paid a hefty price.
There have been, however, cases where, for one reason or another, hospitals or physicians have overridden that decision, and sometimes they're sued, sometimes by the patient who survives.
Zita Lazzarini, a medical ethicist at UConn, says she understands the emotional response of doctors and nurses at Danbury Hospital. But she says the medical community has come to understand the rights of patients to make their own decisions.
If you just change the facts a little bit, you can see how for most people they want to be able to exercise that degree of control over their medical treatment.
But Monique Shea says her sister's resolve was the result of intense pressure from the Jehovah's Witnesses. Several days after she died, Francois San Fernandre's funeral was held at St. Teresa's Catholic Church in Woodbury, in the tradition she was born into and lived most of her life. No one from the Jehovah's Witnesses was invited to attend.
We did speak to Francois' husband, but he didn't want to go on camera. He says he may at some point, but right now, the family is exploring their legal options, options that most likely will include a lawsuit. The question is, against who? Ethan Nance?
And there are at least a couple of options who potentially could be sued.
Obviously, her vein was nicked by the surgeons. On the other hand, the doctors could potentially argue if they were able to do what they could have done, she would not have died.